Hello, my name is Sasha Struthers, and today I'm going to do a quick video on a concept that I find to be very important. It's not really a concept, more it's a way of being or a philosophy, approach, a mental state. And that is when you are a landlord, your relationship with your tenant is strictly business. And this is probably being very controversial, and probably someone's going to disagree with me. I don't know. But I find it a little baffling, the landlord-tenant relationship, and how some of the time clients of mine, which are predominantly landlords, fail to do things for their own benefit, for the fear of compromising their friendship or the relationship with their tenant. And this is why I'm very adamant that a relationship between a landlord and a tenant is professional or business, however you want to call it, is that at the end of the day, and this is a philosophy that I kind of have for a lot of things, sometimes caring more does not make something better. And in this instance, the tenant is paying for a habitable premise. And this applies to residential, but also applies to commercial. But I'll say, residential in this instance, because that tends to be the area where landlords and tenants have the most tension. So, we'll limit this to residential. Your tenant is renting from you a habitable unit, and they're paying for that. And you're providing them a habitable unit. That's it. What often happens is a landlord will go above and beyond, a call of duty, and will bend over backwards to help and benefit a tenant. And that creates kind of two problems. One, tenants should not be too familiar with their landlords, and familiarity breeds contempt. So I don't think in many ways a landlord should be, I don't think there should be animosity, but I really don't think they should be any favor trading in that sense. Two, if you give a mouse a cookie, they're gonna want like the entire cookie aisle. And so what ends up happening when you go above and beyond what is required of you, tenants start to expect more. And in the reverse, when tenants go above and beyond what they should be doing, oftentimes this is like, oh, I created a little communal garden, or I go and I clean up around the building. Well, if that's not required of you, which is sometimes required of a resident manager, but if you're doing it of your own volition, and then the landlord doesn't compensate you for it, that creates a problem, because people are not being rewarded for things they don't agree to do, especially in a landlord-tenant relationship. So in both camps, tenants always feel very frustrated that they're not being acknowledged for their hard efforts, even though they're by and large done not by request, but on their own. And landlords feel like they're being underappreciated when they go above and beyond for a tenant, even though they're not required to do so. So I always tell people, do what is required of you, and do it peacefully and professionally and cordially. But don't be upset when the other side isn't overly favorable to you as you wish them to be. And that's expectation setting. Your expectations will always fail if you think someone's going to treat you necessarily the way you treat them, or that you're going to get compensated, rewarded, acknowledged for doing something voluntarily. This could also be broken down into relationships, personally. But that's always the problem when you do too much for the other side. Also, I've seen clients where, it might be in their best interest to, let's say, sell a property. Maybe they're getting older and they want to trade into something else that's less management intensive, or they want to, take out the equity and do something with it, whatever it is. And a lot of times landlords will be hesitant to do that because they're afraid, well, the next landlord's, not going to care about my tenant as much as I care about them, which goes to the main point. If you're over coddling your tenants, and I respect that you care about them and you want to be a good landlord and not a slumlord, but that's kind of not your problem. When you're going to do something And it's like, hey, if you bought this building a long time ago and you've maintained it and you've kept it afloat and you've built some equity and now you want to do something with that hard-earned equity, go do it. But to hold your life back because you're afraid of what a tenant might think of you, they really are not thinking of you. I'll be honest. They don't care. It's more like you're overthinking the whole situation. But I find this when I deal with, landlords that come to me, and sometimes it's even like when they're getting sued for habitability. They go, well, I went above and beyond and I did all of this stuff for them. But did you focus on the things that were required of you to do? Well, and that becomes, depending on the case. But do what's required of you and document it. If you have an inspection and you have to do some repairs, do the repairs and keep records of the repairs. But if you go and you start like beautifying things, unless you really want to, which I am all about historical preservation and beautification. But if you're gonna go do something and you think that the tenants are gonna appreciate it more, or you think maybe an unruly tenant will cooperate, no. You do things because you want to do them and you expect nothing in return. And, for instance, if you went and beautified a building in a rent-controlled unit, unless you can pass through some of that expenditure through a capital improvement, a tenant is not going to go, hey, why don't I give you some more money because I really like this landscaping you did here? No. And you couldn't increase the rent anyways because it's not allowed under rent control. But the point I'm making is these expectations that the tenant's going to treat you the same as you're treating them or vice versa. The landlord's going to treat you and acknowledge you better for you going above and beyond doesn't work. And it's, again, simply, this is a business transaction. A tenant is paying you for a habitable premise, and you in turn are collecting money so that you can take a portion of that money to keep the premise habitable. Your tenant is your customer. And that's that. And I go through the example of like software. When you have software and someone purchases it and they use it, it's all great until the thing has a bug. And then it's like the worst. And they're calling tech and they're complaining, and maybe they're even leaving a bad review. Even though the intention was, I'm trying to make the software to fulfill a need of the end user. And that goes the same thing with tenants a lot of the time. You have this great apartment building and it's spectacular, and then one thing goes wrong and they're really upset about it. And then you as a landlord feel underappreciated, but at the end of the day, you should not ever expect to be appreciated. You should do what's required of you. And if you want to go above and beyond that, it's not because you expect some sort of acknowledgement in return. And that's a two-way street. That goes with tenants. Just do what was required of you and keep it very cordial, and obviously always be kind. But this dynamic that landlords and tenants now have where they're overly friendly with each other, down the road, I always see problems with it. Because we're always so great, we're always so nice until something doesn't go in someone's favor. And it's usually like someone's in a bind. It's typically based on either a repair request or a rent. It's always the two spots. It's always the two spots. Also, this is a little bit of a rant, but I'll add at the end of the video, when you can increase rents, and you're allowed to increase rents, as a landlord, you should increase them. Because later down the line, when a tenant becomes a nuisance, or the unit's underperforming, and I get calls all the time, well, I was such a great landlord, I never increased the rent on them, and I don't know why they're acting this way. Well, that's on you. You should have increased your rent. You're legally allowed to do so, when you're allowed to do so. And don't expect, well, I'm not going to increase the rent, and then in turn, the tenant's just going to be so charming. No, that just means you lost a bunch of money you didn't need to lose. So that is kind of like my mini rant, but I hope people watch this, and maybe it's controversial, but I think it's just realistic. I think if people start taking that approach, a lot of the day-to-day problems with landlords and tenants would be substantially mitigated, as there would be an understanding of who's required to do what in this transaction. So that's really all I have on that point. If you have any questions about it, feel free to send me an email if you want to talk. Or you have a tenant that fits this kind of description of what I just went through with you, and you want suggestions on how to address it, by all means, you can set up a consultation with me. Other than that, good luck and thank you.